Hey guys, today a video on the mechanics behind StoryFlow and how it all works. It's going to be a bit more technical than usual, so if you're interested in that and want to know how all the different pieces of the product work, this is a great video for you. If you're not interested in that, then it's best to skip. So as you can see here, this is a abstraction, sort of a blueprint of how our system works. It's sliced into three parts. I'm going to focus on the bottom part. I call this the StoryFlow operating system. This is everything behind the scenes that allows for the magic experience that our clients enjoy. And as you can see, it's quite a lot of moving parts. So that's also basically where the value sits, right? People can plug into our API within 5 minutes and start getting value out of it. But let's look under the hood and see really how it all works. So when a client basically signs up with us, we're using a project management software internally that's called ClickUp, and we start spinning up a folder for the new client that has a lot of the sub details or sub lists ready to go. And this really helps us to speed up the onboarding process and give value to the client as quick as we can. We'll have the client details, which is mostly the admin and legal side of things after they've signed the agreement or the contract. We've got a checklist, what we have to complete in order for them to go live. Then there is the story blueprints. This is really what a typical story outline for this particular client might look like. Then we've got the story pipeline. This is where the actual content on behalf of the client is going through. We've got the story intelligence, which is where we derive insights from the stories that they collect, as well as any kind of lead gen that happens around the social components of posting it. And then on the library side of things, for our clients that start to have more than 25, 30 pieces of content per month, they can make use of the library feature, which allows for greater searchability. Once we get the client details, we set up the story blueprint together with the client. We then integrate it into our system using an API. And then obviously we add the client to Slack for day-to-day communications. We don't communicate all that much because luckily things have been quite stable recently, but we do prefer it over email and definitely over calls because it's just very time consuming and difficult to get all that synchronous communication going. So we prefer async. There's two ways we can connect with our client systems. One is a more manual way. We're about 70% now of the beta users are on the CRM integration. So it definitely, people do seem to favor that. And then the other 30% is on the ClickUp integration. They're a bit more manual, this one. Basically, without the CRM integration, we ask our clients to manually send us the details of the prospect with whom they would like to create a piece of. And then on the CRM side of things, obviously it's a one-time setup. And after that, it's a one-click sort of post API, and then we just push a bunch of the variables into our system that allow us to start collecting, editing, and then ultimately publishing the story. I'll skip this. This is basically some technical setup in terms of what we use on the low-code side of things. But yeah, let's look at the service delivery. So let's go through a scenario where a new lead comes in. So it is basically how it works. StoryFlow, we've got our clients. And below that, within each client is obviously a list of people that they create content with. We call those leads. Sometimes we call them end users. And that's really what we're talking about here. When a new lead comes in, it is on behalf of a client. It reaches our system. We manage an internal pipeline with various stages, which you can see here. Once a lead comes in, it goes straight into the story inbox. And we make sure that all of the basic required fields are basically there. And we notify our ops team with a Slack message to say, hey, please be aware this client now has a new lead, and make sure that all systems are working. The lead is then added to a client drip campaign. So we can use text messages, we can use email, even LinkedIn if the client wishes to do so. And we can also get a warm introduction from the client over email. So this is growing in popularity because people do like, with especially existing customers, to give them a heads up and basically have a bit of a personal touch when they introduce us when it comes to collecting their story down the road. So there's various ways of us getting in touch with them. Some are sort of outbound and others are more inbound, as I mentioned through the introduction. So once the prospect, the lead, then actually replies, we push that notification to Slack. Again, our team just really stays in the loop of all of that activity. It is much more for monitoring purposes and making sure that our systems are working and that we minimize any kind of downtime. And then the reply has to be reviewed by one of our teams, whether this reply was an interested reply or not. There's tons of features these days through AI that you can monitor that. We work with sort of more high value tickets, B2B clients, and there's really no room for error. We don't want to delegate this step to AI. So for now, it is all still manual. And we make sure that when a request is actually accepted, meaning when one of the end users is willing to participate in a story, that he or she is then flagged as such. So then we can do two things. It really depends on how the client and the end user agree on how they want to collaborate on creating this story and how we can collect it. The first way is through a Zoom integration. We'll basically host a Zoom call for the client and he or she can conduct the story narrative or interview themselves, or we can jump in and do that. It depends on the company and the use case. There's pros and cons to each, but essentially the big difference is when we do it, it puts a little bit more distance or sort of objectivity between the end user and the client on behalf of which we then collect the story. Obviously, if you're going to interview your customers directly, it's going to be more biased. And when you publish such a story, it's perhaps going to carry less weight for future decision makers when it comes to buying your service or product. So that's something to keep in mind, but it's not they're not mutually exclusive. Both work and it really just depends on what the client prefers. So depending on which medium they choose, we then either send a Calendly or a cal.com link to get it on the calendar. We also send the questions ahead of time, or at least the topics. So we don't want to play any gotcha games or catch anyone off guard. That's completely not at all what the service is about. We want to make them relaxed and comfortable, that they actually disclose some of their experiences, whatever topics are brought up on behalf of our client, right, in the interview. So the same goes for the form route. If we don't use a Zoom call, but we choose the second way or the second type of medium, which is collecting it through a form, that really just means that the end user can type his or her story on their own time and we'll collect it that way. Either way, prior to accepting, they can get full access to what type of topics and sometimes even what type of questions our client would like to engage them on, and that usually actually helps with conversion. So then when the replies come in, meaning we actually extract a transcript from the Zoom call or we get the type form or the Google form, whatever tech our client wants to use, we collect either of those data points, then our editing team gets to work. The story obviously in the pipeline gets updated to story collected stage, because now the story is in our possession, but it's still sort of like a raw piece of text and needs to be, pretty heavily edited, at least from a layout perspective. And we got to add visuals. We'll do a spelling check. We might add a GPT driven summary if the client is interested in that. And we'll definitely slice the full interview in different formats like X or LinkedIn posts so that our client can repurpose the story for marketing purposes. So once that's all done and the client gives a green light, we can now publish a story, and then the stage story is published is activated. And ultimately, and we're working on this currently, quite excited about that, we can start collecting story intelligence around what's going on post-publication. So who engaged with this post, whether it's on X, whether it's on LinkedIn, what type of people, like I said, commented, for example, but also just within the story itself, is there any insights relevant to other teams within our client business? Let's say, we work a lot with the content team, so their primary goal is to get more content out there, make it more authentic, replace some of these stale sort of like white papers or ebooks that very few people are interested in, and instead like generate this sort of authentic human generated content, which it is. It's all just kind of unique and one-off, and then publish that to drive top of funnel and engagement. But there might be insights in one of those stories that could be beneficial to sales teams, right? And so if you ask certain questions in that story, or if the end user or the guest of the interview in this case discloses some sort of valuable piece of information that might not be directly beneficial to the marketing team, but might instead be beneficial to the sales team to help increase conversion rates, we want to get that piece of insight, right? And so that's what we're working on right now. We call it story intelligence, and I think it's going to be pretty cool. So That's in a nutshell, basically how things work behind the scenes. Like I said, there's more things to it here on top. I won't cover that today. But yeah, if you're interested in trying out StoryFlow, send me an email at jord@joinstoryflow.com or just book a call at joinstoryflow.com, and I'll make sure to be on that call as well and see if we can do something together. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and see you in the next one.